Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate Okoli. I'm a relationship expert. I work full time as a lawyer, and so you can imagine over the years, I've had the privilege of handling loads and loads of cases regarding divorce matters, settlement agreements, relating to financial disputes when couples decide to go their separate ways. Sometimes I've also acted in my role as a mediator between couples to see how they can, because most times divorce is actually not in the best interest of couples, including the children of their marriage relationship. But in worst case scenarios, when domestic violence is prevalent in relationships, couples may decide to go their separate ways. I'm going to particularly deal with the women, because most times I work with women. I'm not. This video does not imply that men also are not victims of abuse, but I would like to reckon from my experience over the years. We're talking about over 25 years. I would like to say categorically that the percentage of women who are abused are more than the percentage of men who are abused. You might want to argue with me to say, okay, because men don't actually come up, they don't speak up and everything. But having said that, I think most times, 70% of the times, the women are more abused, are most times the victims of domestic abuse. Also, women are more they desire more in a relationship, so they go into a relationship with a mindset, with all the high expectations and everything. So if at the end of the day they don't get what they want, they are usually the ones who become very, very unhappy in their marriage relationship. So I'm going to talk about briefly the topic I'm talking about today is why people who are abusers, are they really born abusers? Is anyone born an abuser? Is anyone born an abuser? And what are the causes? What is it that makes a man or a woman want to live their life abusing their spouse? You know, a lot of times what we must realize is if we don't know the cause, we will not understand. Obviously, we will not find a cure. If we don't know the cause of a thing, we will not understand, we will not be able to find a cure. And even when we find the cure, we must try and go back into the foundation in order to break that cycle of domestic abuse, that cycle of domestic violence. If you don't know what an abuser is dealing with, the reasons why they do what they do, you might not actually be in a position to empathize with them or to understand why they come across the way they come across. So I'm going to kind of talk about in order for you to understand the reasons why some abusers do what they do, it's because of a broken foundation. These are foundational issues. The way they were raised, the things they experienced or saw other people close to them experience when they were growing up, the environment where they were raised, the circumstances, sometimes trauma, sometimes a rejection, sometimes a feeling of abandonment, sometimes anger, which obviously may have been as a result of, again, like I said, what they experienced when they're growing up, whilst growing up. So these are some of the things that causes people to become abusers. A lot of times they may have been abused themselves whilst growing up. I'm going to make a particular reference to maybe raising children and domestic violence and why it is important that we know that whatever it is that we teach our children whilst raising them, we as parents, we're their role models. So whatever we model to them, that's what they're going to carry on to obviously their own relationships with their children, their spouses also. So a lot of times when people become very violent, very physically violent or emotionally, obviously, when they abuse their spouses emotionally or psychologically, even sometimes financially and sexually, it is because of the way they have been raised. It is because of the things they experienced when they were growing up. It is because of the homes where they have been raised. It is because of what was modeled to them when they were growing up. They may have seen their father abusing their mother. They may have been victims of abuse themselves, i.e., maybe whilst they were growing up, any little thing, any little error, their parents hit them, use violence, use belt, flog them, hit every little thing. This is why it is important in raising children. We must minimize and, in fact, if possible, completely eradicate using violence as a way to resolve conflicts or as a correctional measure for our children on the home front. Because for each time we hit that child, for each time we use belt, for each time we actually cause pain on our children, we are actually reaffirming and obviously telling the child that it is okay to hit, it is okay to use belts on people, it is okay to kick, it is okay to call names, it is okay to keep malice or to do obviously the silent treatment, it is okay to blame others, it is okay not to say I am sorry, it is okay not to accept when we are wrong. So if this is the way we come across, because the children are watching us, so they're looking at, remember, the home is the very first example, the very first environment where the child is being shown an example as to how they are going to live their lives when they leave home. So everything that we model to our children on the home front, that is what they are going to take out, and that is what they are going to practice when they become adults with their spouses, with their own children, and even with friends and colleagues. So if for every time a child does something, we hit the child, as the child grows up, the child becomes violent, the child becomes very angry, the child becomes very vengeful. So that is why you see when they grow up, they go out in the streets and they become very violent. That's why you see children, even at the age of 10, 11, 12, rather than being obviously innocent, they're no more innocent. It's like they want to join this gang culture. They want to carry knives. They want to carry gun. They want to be violent. These things are not learned in the streets. They're only better reinforced in the streets, but they are learned right from the home, where these children were raised. The home, it's a very important part of our society, because this is where we raise children. When children are born, they are innocent. They don't have any emotion. They don't feel nothing. So it is what we instill in them. That is what they actually now grow up with to become. So for each time we hit that child, for each time we call that child names, for each time we use a malice or silent treatment to kind of try to reinforce our control or our authority, thinking that we are raising our children, what we're trying to reinforce is and to tell that child that to resolve conflicts. This is why we need to minimize we can set boundaries, have you ever wondered, even when you hit a child, the child still goes back to do that same thing you've tried to correct, because the brain is not, the brain of every child is still developing, so they don't actually remember when you say, okay, don't put that ball there, or don't do X, Y, Z. They still go back after 5 minutes and they do it. It doesn't matter whether you hit them or whatever. So that's why as parents we must master the art of patience and tolerance, and to continue to teach them the right thing, most especially by setting boundaries and by showing them love. I tell you, the best way of raising a child, the best way of having to actually get a child to listen to you is by loving them. Loving them doesn't mean that, okay, you're not going to discipline them, but you show them tough love in disciplining by setting examples. So we must try and eradicate violence within our home front, because for each time also we are violent amongst ourselves, like couples fighting, calling themselves names, stonewalling, keeping malice within their home environment. We're teaching the children to reinforce that same level of violence when they now leave home and they become adults themselves. So the way we can minimize and also break the cycle of domestic violence is to start with the home by reducing the violence in the home environment. So stop that hitting, stop that name calling, stop calling that child stupid, fool, idiot, or fat, or whatever. Don't call your children names. Don't call your children foolish. Don't call them names. Because the more you are calling them names, they'll begin to believe you before they believe anybody on the outside. Because you are their first role model. You are their first cheerleader. Whatever you name that child, that is what the child is going to become for you. So if as a father or as a mother, you keep saying to your child, oh, you are stupid, oh, don't be silly, oh, you are foolish, the child is directly or indirectly going to believe you, because mom says she's stupid, or dad says he's stupid. The child is going to believe you. I know it's difficult sometimes when we are angry, we just want to have a kind of outburst and all of that. But if we can control our anger as much as possible and be very careful the words we use on our children, because words are powerful. So if you want to understand more the reasons why an abuser, how a human being who actually professed to you when you first met them that they love you, and then suddenly you now realize that the person is physically abusing you, that person is a damaged person. That person needs help. If there's a way you can, before it escalates, you can get the person to obviously agree with you, to seek professional help. They need help themselves. They need to visit a counselor. They need to begin to go down back to their roots, to begin to talk about the things they experienced when they were growing up. Perhaps they may have seen their dad abusing their mom. They may have seen their mom abusing their dad. They may have been victims of domestic violence themselves. Maybe they had a lot of hitting and beating and kicking and using belts on them when they were growing up. That is why they are so angry. That is why they use anger and aggression and violence. And most of the times you are dealing with them and you are wondering, why? What have I said? Why is this person so angry? The person is dealing with their own demons. If you understand it better, perhaps you might want to see if the violence is not something that is so out of, obviously, if it's something, the early stages, once you notice this, you can begin to speak to that person in love to say, okay, you know what, you need help. Do you want to talk about it? Is it something that has to do with your upbringing? Did you experience violence in your home? Did you see your mom or your dad beating each other? Or did they hit you extremely when you were being raised and everything? The person needs to go and see a counselor. It is important that we begin to address this, because there are so many cases of domestic violence on the home front that are actually being covered up. And after some time, you now hear that either the man or the woman has killed themselves. People still remain in abusive relationships and they just get along without going back to the roots to address the issues, the reasons why this violence continue to prevail in our homes. So the best way to help an abuser, I know this is obviously out of like, oh, a lot of people might say, oh, why will I want to help an abuser? But people continue to remain in abusive relationships. So the way, again, we can manage it to minimize these incidents of domestic violence is when the abuser themselves accept that they have a problem and they begin to look for professional help by going back to their roots, going back to those things that causes them fear, going back to that feeling of rejection, that feeling of anger, that thing that makes them feel they may have been abandoned by their fathers in growing up. They may not even know who their father is. They may have been rejected and all of that. So most times they become overprotective, or they don't keep stable relationships or even stable jobs. These are foundational issues that goes to the roots and the depths of how people were raised. So the best way to also make it a bit understandable and a bit easy for the victim of abuse to cope with this level of abuse is to become even more empathetic towards this abuser, to see how you can get around to obviously speak to this person to help them to seek help. If obviously the relationship is still very important to you, if he or she is willing to accept and to listen, and the two of you can seek professional help so that they can now begin to talk about that hidden pain, that hurt that is on the inside of them, in order to, because the moment they start talking about it and they start releasing the pain, and then obviously they now add a bit of prayer and all of that, they may be able to, and then obviously it's okay to cry, whether you're a man or a woman. It is okay for you to cry, for you to say, or to, again, forgiveness, to be able to either forgive that father that rejected you, to forgive that mother that abandoned you, to forgive that father that abandoned you, to be able to say, okay, you know what, I have forgiven you. That again may be able to help an abuser to release the steam, to release that feeling of unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment that they may have built, bottled up on the inside of them, that is causing them to become extremely angry, to continue to have an unreasonable outburst at each time you want to relate with that person. So think about these things. For every abuser, there is a history. For every abuser, there is a story. For every abuser, there is a brokenness. For every abuser, there is a damage that has been caused in the life of that abuser. So what an abuser actually needs, it's not love, because there are people who are not lovable. No matter how much you want to love them, they are not lovable, because that damage, until they deal with that damage, it's going to be difficult to love that person. Sometimes even when you are showing them love, they are scared, because they've never experienced that kind of love. All they experience maybe in growing up is violence and condemnation, and obviously talking down and emotional abuse and all of that. So what an abuser needs is not love. What an abuser needs is empathy, understanding, and again, if possible, to be able to lead them to begin to address these demons, to be able to face these demons, to say, yes, I have a problem. Yes, I need to deal with this problem. Yes, I want to talk about it. Yes, I need to see a professional. What an abuser needs is forgiveness. In order for you I'm talking to you, that man or that woman. Maybe you have moved out, you've moved on with your life. Maybe you are a survivor of domestic violence. What you need to begin to do now is not to love that abuser, but to empathize with them. So that the moment you empathize with them, because you now understand that it's, obviously, they were not created bad, because as humans, we've got goodness on the inside of us. It is what they experienced in their life themselves that they are replicating, you see. So the moment you begin to understand that this person is a damaged person, it makes it easier for you now to be able to be at that point where you can actually forgive the person, free the person, and then move on with your life so you can have a better life. So I hope you've been blessed by this short video. If this is the case, I would like to admonish you to please share to your friends and loved ones, and of course your teenage children also, because we need to begin to understand all of this, so that even when the teenage children, they now become adults and they are now in their own relationship, you can begin to ask questions to understand people's background and the way they were raised. It's very, very important. And in rounding up, there's something I need to tell you. When God places people in your life, be it friends, be it your children, be it your husband, be it your wife, please try as much as possible to make them better people. Do not hurt them. Do not make them shed tears. Do not make them end up in psychiatric hospitals. Do not cost them their early death. The way we treat people, the seed we sow into people's lives can either make and mar them. May it be that every seed that we sow in the life of our children, every seed that we sow in the lives of our friends, every seed that we sow in the lives of our husbands and our wives, may they be good seeds. May we be empowered to be sowers of good seeds in the life of people who God has placed in our lives. When God places people in your life, please do not hurt them. Thank you very much. I'll be on your way soon. Thank you. Have a blessed day.